Seven, so started. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm excited to have the second installment of our Flannery O'Connor book club focused on the best-selling biography by Brad Gooch of Flannery, A Life of Flannery O'Connor, national bestseller. So this is our second installment, and we'll have one more that will be March 20th. Both in person in Eatonton at the Georgia Writers Museum at 2 p.m. and then again in the evening at 7 p.m. So we're making our way through this large tomb and we'll get there next month. And I also just wanted to announce a few other things. If you're in Milledgeville or in Middle Georgia at all, we have the second event in our inaugural Southern Gothic lecture series at Georgia College, and we're really excited to be bringing Teresa Godot of Vanderbilt to give a lecture on Jesmyn Ward's Eco-Gothic. So really excited about that. If you know Teresa Godot, she's a real expert in Gothic American literature, 19th century, but she's moving into environmental humanities and is an expert on that as well. So we're excited. That'll be this coming Tuesday, 5 p.m. in the museum education room of the library. Refreshments to follow, free and open to the public. We're also wanting to let people know we have a lot of birthday stuff coming up. We'll put a link to our 100th, it's the centennial, so O'Connor's 100th birthday on March 25th. And we have a whole week of festivities, including a screening of Wildcat, a unique art opening, which is never before seen visual art, O'Connor's paintings and drawings, etchings, things like that, visual. We'll have a whole gallery experience with that, and a lecture by our very favorite Bob Donahue, which is going to be entitled Flannery's Other Art. I believe there's a lot of titles. That's one of them that's it's in the press, but he's going to give a great talk. I've seen some excerpts and we'll be in the gallery space there viewing for the first time visual art by Flannery O'Connor. There's also going to be a music festival with Colin Cutler. Some of you might know him, a former NEH fellow, an O'Connor scholar whose album Tar Water is entirely based on Flannery O'Connor's works. Look him up. Colin Cutler has a great website. You can stream his work live, free. We'll be performing live with a band out at Andalusia Farm. So again, there's a whole week of stuff. I've only highlighted a few of these events, but check it out. Come to Milledgeville. We're going to have a big party. And so I will turn it over now to our favorite book club facilitator, Bruce Gentry.
Hi, everybody. Let's see, what announcements do I have? In March 20th, as Katie mentioned, we will read the last 3 chapters of the Brad Gooch biography and contemplate death and dying studies. Susan Srigley at the conference last September made the announcement that that's going to be the next wave of O'Connor criticism, is talking about Flannery O'Connor and death and dying, and you'll be able to follow the whole sequence. And another announcement I probably ought to throw in, since we're talking biography here, is that Carol Schloss is going to be in town on March the 4th talking about her biography, which deals with a lot of material that wasn't available to Brad Gooch when he published his book back in 2009. 6 o'clock, Museum Education Room on the Georgia College campus. And let me ask a question I should know the answer to. Are we going to be able to live stream the Carol Schloss talk? Are we going to record it? What's the plan?
Well, I am just about to put a link in the chat for people on Zoom, and it will also be recorded and also go live on our Facebook. So if you miss it, No excuse.
I can watch it later. Okay.
Our
Okay.
website has all the past events and a YouTube channel.
Okay.
So,
Okay, good. All right, we're talking about the middle of a book. And let me say what I sometimes forget to say, which is that I just have a grab bag of things to bring up, and anybody who wants to bring up something that they want to say something about or that they want to ask a question about, feel free to interrupt at any time and throw out your question. We have the chat function going here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. And it's already got several messages. And feel free to add your comment there or just raise your hand physically or mechanically and we'll get to you. When I look over these pages, these years of O'Connor's life, I find I have things I want to bring up about Wise Blood, not because they are startling details, but just because they're kind of interesting to contemplate, and maybe some reminders are good. I suppose my starting point would be, but I think Brad Gooch is pointing out that it wasn't exactly inevitable that Flannery O'Connor was going to make the hero of our first novel a World War II veteran. And probably what we're seeing here is in the first novel is a result of the fact that Flannery was going to Iowa, the MFA program, with a whole bunch of people who could afford to go to graduate school because of the GI Bill. They were veterans from World War II, and they all thought they were going to become Ernest Hemingway and write the great American war novel. And here over in the corner is little quiet Flannery with the accent nobody could understand. And of course, she decided that she was going to beat them at their own game and that she was going to write a war novel that was more successful than any of their war novels, even though they would never really pay much attention to her. One of the things that Brad points out is that Iowa kind of had a bias towards Southerners, that they thought Southern writing was really good, and so they brought in all the stars of Southern literature in the time that they could get to come to Iowa City to read and teach classes. And everything that made Flannery's Southernness stick out, be noticeable, including the fact that she wasn't joining in with the others. She was over on the edge all the time. It made those visiting writers pay attention to her. The graduate students were making fun of her accent and saying they didn't want to listen to her reading one of her stories. And so the visiting famous people would read Flannery O'Connor's story aloud for the workshop. And this, of course, resulted in the visiting writers realizing that she's really good, because, you kind of have to pay attention when you're reading something aloud. So, Flannery's a great writer. She also got lucky with the way these things played out. And even if she did write a first novel that wasn't really based much on experience that she had, yeah, she knew that the waves were, that the military people were on campus when she was in college, and her father did kind of have a connection to the military, but still, it was a leap for her to decide that she could understand, the kind of PTSD stuff that Hazel Motes is going through upon his return to the U.S., to home. And So there are a bunch of comments in here about the odd things that went into the making of Wise Blood, and I will just bring up a few of them. But before we do that, I do want to say right at the beginning of chapter 4, there's a funny little detail that Brad Gooch makes much of, that I find rather fascinating. Right at the beginning, that Paul Engel remembers that Flannery O'Connor had the most beat up handbag of all time, and she'd squeeze the life out of it. I'm paraphrasing here. Okay, seems like an unimportant detail until you go back and you read the comforts of home, everything that rises must converge, and you realize that Flannery O'Connor is using something, I'm not sure what, about her life and her whatever it was she was taught about her handbag, and made it into a big symbol that was useful more than once. Later, we're told the little anecdote about Flannery O'Connor going to the party and being told that the Eucharist is a nice symbol, and she famously said, "Well, if it's a symbol, to hell with it." Not the greatest piece of literary criticism Flannery O'Connor ever came up with. It's not a particularly polite thing for her to say. Yeah, it is a symbol too. No matter what else, no matter whatever else you need to. Mary McCarthy apparently thought that she was trying to get Flannery out of an uncomfortable situation by taking over the conversation and saying something nice about the Eucharist. She didn't expect to be shot down by her guest. I've gotten to the point where I think Flannery O'Connor made that comment because it was 1 a.m. and she was up well past her bedtime and feeling a little weird about the fact that she hadn't said anything through the whole dinner party. You know, she makes that funny line about the trained dog that was brought in and had rehearsed one trick and then forgot it at the moment of crisis. I think a little too much is made of that quote. Okay. Well, what else to say about that, about chapter 4? This isn't really getting to much of the Wise Blood stuff yet. She was only 20 when she had her first publication, The Geranium. And it was 7 years later that she got Wise Blood published in 52. So, you know, Wise Blood took a long time. And you know, these are the events that are talked about in Wildcat, about Flannery struggling to figure out what to do with that book and how to feel about the writing life and her Catholicism and how to reconcile all of that stuff. 7 years was a long time to write a short novel. One of the things that I think Brad implies that other people have documented is that Flannery knew when she was writing her odd short novel and making it odder and odder and odder the more she worked on it, that she could afford to have high principles about artistry. She was going to find a publisher, and she knew it. And so some of the peculiarities of Wise Blood may have more to do with turning off the potential contract that she had with the first publisher, the one that gave her the prize for the first 6 chapters, than deep commitment to what she was putting in the novel. Now, by the time she finished, I'm sure she had total commitment to the novel. She wrote thousands of pages that are sitting in the Georgia College Library. Come to Milledgeville and be amazed by all the extra stuff that she thought about putting in the book. And you know, this seems to me to be a fair supplement to what's in Brad Gooch's book. When she started this book and she wrote the first 6 chapters and she won the prize that was guaranteeing somebody's going to publish it, what she was working on was a much simpler, straightforward, maybe even conventional novel than what we ended up with, thank goodness. In the original novel, Hazel Motes, Hazel Wickers, he's called for a long time in the manuscripts, is this kind of perfectly normal, fairly nice guy. He doesn't pick a fight with everybody he meets. And he's coming back from the war and he's going back home and he has a choice. Will he go with the New World as represented by his sister, who is going through, post-World War II domestic expectations? The center of her life is her new appliances in her kitchen. Is he going to try to live like her? This is, of course, the character who's thinking about having an abortion. And abortion was going to be apparently a major theme of the original version of Wise Blood. Or is he going to ally himself with a couple of street preachers he's met when he gets to his sister's town? And the street preachers he meets are perfectly normal, straightforward, sincere, Asa and Sabbath. They're not complicated, crooked tricksters. They're just a couple of people who take it out to the street and they preach the old-time religion of a kind of eccentric sort. But the original conception of the book is that these people are sincere. Does Hazel want to describe and refine his own version of traditional religion as he grew up with? Well, in a way, he ends up doing that, but my goodness, the convoluted route that he follows to get back where he started in this book is much more complicated than it was when she was starting and when she was thinking about it in workshop, maybe. I've never quite been sure how much of Wise Blood she was thinking about while she was still in the workshop in those early years. Excuse me. She left some things out. She didn't just revise and take it in her own in an odd direction. She also took a lot of stuff out. She took out Hazel's sister entirely. If you read A Stroke of Good Fortune, think of it as what Wise Blood was going to have as chapter 2. All the concerns of this sister and her life trying to live in post-World War II America, and it's not going so well. This is the story by O'Connor, became a story by O'Connor with the least plot she ever had. A woman walks upstairs and has a revelation that she's pregnant. The end. Not your typical Flannery O'Connor title. Why bring this up in relation to Wise Blood? I know of no instance where Flannery gave readings from Wise Blood. She must have at some point. What we always hear is that she would give readings of A Good Man Is Hard to Find because it was the story she could get through without laughing. I met somebody one time who said he was at a reading by Flannery O'Connor and he couldn't remember what she read, but he said she started laughing so hard over her own prose that she dropped her book, and he got to go up on stage, pick up Flannery O'Connor's book, and hand it back to her so she could continue with the reading. I love that anecdote if it's true. She was a great fan of her own stuff. She thought she was immensely clever. But then there's the story about Stephanie, I'll get to you. Then there's the story about this part that she left out, A Stroke of Good Fortune. And what we're told from various sources is that Flannery would read that story, and she used it for workshop at Iowa one time, in a very dramatic, peculiar, exaggerated style. that when she read, she would sometimes really rev up the Southern accent more than in her normal speech. And that for a stroke of good fortune, she would try to reproduce the sound of Ruby Hill walking up the stairs. So that the way Flannery read the story, you heard clumping of somebody struggling up flights of stairs for the course of this story. So what do I make of that? Flannery was very quiet and very modest, and yet she had the courage to perform her fiction in an odd way that she was going to draw attention to how she was performing. She was a very reticent, quiet, over on the edges person, and she was also a big ham. Okay, that's my little point. Stephanie, you have a question. Unmute yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Bruce. And I wanted to ask, one of the feelings that I got from Gooch in particular is that it feels like in the chapters that we read for tonight, that Wise Blood took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort, it took a lot of wrangling and reshaping, and that to some extent it was almost overworked. Whereas some of the other pieces that she wrote came about kind of quickly, or like that she was able to just sort of, put together and put out into the world. And I just wondered kind of what your take on that is, as far as how do scholars look at Wise Blood, as far as like whether it's overworked, whether it's like it was just continued to be finessed until it was just the way she wanted it to be, in comparison to some of her other like shorter pieces.
Wise Blood doesn't get that much respect generally. I think the stories always get more respect than the novels. I think Flannery's whole career, she thought there was this obligation to be working on a novel in order to be taken seriously. And then every once in a while, she could just relax and have fun and spin out some little thing like A Good Man Is Hard to Find, or Good Country People, or The Displaced Person. Oh, what a relief to write something short and simple compared to the novel I'm forced to write to satisfy the literary establishment. I think Wise Blood is a great novel, but I certainly agree. When I'm going through the thousands of additional pages of manuscript and seeing how Flannery tried all sorts of stuff that she then gave up on, I think she really did figure out what she wanted by trying, waiting to see what she wrote and then seeing whether she liked it. And everything changed about Wise Blood. There's the the sister was like the second most important character in the first draft of the novel, and she gets thrown out entirely. There is a lot of talk in the early version of Wise Blood about Hazel Motes' mother. Catherine Bowen has done all the work that's possible to do on paying attention to Hazel Motes' mother, who is still in the novel, but it is just a little bit of what was in there before. Well, Catherine Bowen would say that the mother is still there and she's still very important. And this is really a novel about Hazel Motes and his mother. And she just felt like she had to cut the mother out some. Why? Well, I don't know if Brad says it, but when he was talking about As I Lay Dying, the Faulkner novel, where, he's thinking about the mother in the casket for a number of pages, it could be, it's, the anxiety of influence. Yeah, Flannery O'Connor paid attention to Faulkner, and she knew that he was the great Southern writer, yada, yada, yada. But she looked at her novel at a certain point and said, anything that's going to make people think that I'm imitating Faulkner, I got to get rid of it. And it may be that's why, the mama, who is a pretty interesting character, interesting stuff about her and Hazelnuts' father and her her sexual history. I mean, just Mama is really interesting in those manuscripts. But if it's going to sound like Faulkner, better get out of his way, cut that stuff out. And I'm not sure if that explains why the sister got cut, but I think it does explain why Mother got cut. I want to go back for a minute to my brilliant comment about Stroke of Good Fortune and how important it is to Flannery O'Connor and the funny way she read it. Go back and look at the early story called The Crop. It's in her thesis. And notice that Miss Willerton, the struggling writer who appears in that story, cares deeply, or says she does, about how her fiction sounds. And most of The Crop is making fun of Miss Willerton and maybe female writers in general. But isn't that interesting that what Miss Willerton does and the story makes fun of is something Flannery O'Connor did? I think Flannery is Miss Willerton and has all of her anxieties and all of that self-doubt that she could put into that story about Miss Willerton. She's feeling it about herself. That's the story I imagine in the Klein house, about which we're just going to be doing stuff for forever now that we've got our hands on it. Okay, moving right along.
Wait, can you just clarify that comment
Yeah, which one?
about the Klein house?
Oh, I imagine that the Klein house is where the struggling Miss Willerton is trying to write her stories, and she's surrounded by relatives. I imagine them in the dining room of that house, which you're going to get to restore just any day now, right? Disapproving and saying, you can't be a writer. And at the end of last month's section of this biography, there's the stuff about her relatives didn't think she was going to be able to succeed in Iowa. She's going to come back to Georgia, penitent and beaten. And so, there's all this complicated psychology about what she's doing. I think, okay, so that's a continuation of what was going on when she was, or that's continued when she's writing The Crop. And she does have all of those anxieties. But then Flannery turns it into something of a showpiece. I will make a big deal about resembling Miss Willerton in some ways, and I'm going to be a success. I'm going to show that even Miss Willerton could be a success if she played her cards right. Okay, there's my clarification of that comment. Okay, I'm shifting to the next chapter and the stuff that went on at Yaddo. I know people who say they don't like Flannery O'Connor based on what she did at Yaddo. And this is not that big a deal in her writing life, okay? She was foolish. She let Robert Lowell talk her into being silly about politics. She got involved with a McCarthy-esque witch hunt. She joined him in trying to get the director of Yaddo fired for being sympathetic and nice to a communist. Flannery didn't know what she was doing. She was just real impressed with Robert Lowell, who was nice to her and declared her a saint and all kinds of odd things. And what gets me about rereading what Gooch says about it, I don't question anything he says. I think there's a lot more to the story than anybody has been able to document still. What strikes me this time is that when people were writing petitions and declaring which side they were on. Catherine Ann Porter and Carson McCullers both rushed to the defense of the people who were being attacked by Robert Lowell and, his disciple, Flannery O'Connor. And I think Catherine Ann Porter and Flannery became friends and correspondents later. Maybe this has a little bit to do with the ongoing battle between Flannery O'Connor and Carson McCullers. They might have, put each other in pigeonholes based on some of what was going on at that time. Okay, what next? I love the business that's in here about gorillas in movies. Flannery heard about a movie in Manhattan where somebody in a monkey suit is greeting people who are coming to the theater. And then later she comes back to Milledgeville, and here too, somebody is dressed in an ape suit and greeting people as they go into the theater for a different movie. First one's Mighty Joe Young, and the second one is Mark of the Gorilla. And I don't know why we haven't been showing these movies somehow at Georgia College all of these years. I think I love the fact that it's a combination of ridiculous pop culture stuff from both New York and Milledgeville. Sarah Gordon there's a connection here. Sarah Gordon has written the article to document that one of the major sources for Flannery O'Connor's inspiration in Wise Blood and in early stories was her reading of New Yorker articles. This is on my mind because the New Yorker is coming to town to cover the art show that we're about to put on. That there was a New Yorker writer who named Joseph Mitchell, who wrote a great many character sketches about the eccentric people wandering the streets of Manhattan. And Flannery, who was just wild about the idea she might get something published in the New Yorker, took all these odd people, made them Southerners, and put them into Wise Blood and some of her other stories. So she's really inspired by people who lived in New York in what has become famous as a really, really, really oddly Southern novel. You can't make this stuff up, it's way too weird. And on this reading of Wise Blood, because I'm now obsessed with the New Yorker, I noticed a detail that I had never noticed before. It's in the notes to the, where he got quotes, his documentation of sources at the back of the book. Flannery O'Connor submitted Good Country People to the New Yorker, and they rejected it. Did you see that? It's in the footnote on page 419. And, the New Yorker has published things by Flannery O'Connor, but not stories. And I find it amazing that they didn't think that Good Country People was up to snuff. I had put that in the category of, well, it's just so good that she just rushed it into her first collection and she didn't have to publish it anyplace. No, she did. It just wasn't in the New Yorker because they didn't think the ending was good enough. Okay, I'm gonna save that for the time when I need something clever to say to a New Yorker writer about about their ability to make American fiction whatever they say it is at the New Yorker. I used to say that in class. I used to say, American literature is whatever the New Yorker fiction editor thinks American literature is at any given time. Okay, everybody write that down. But now I think, okay, that was a little bit of an overgeneralization. Okay, that's everything I wanted to say about chapter 5. Okay, moving right along. And we're already halfway through the hour. I can't believe it. All right. Chapter 6. Brad has the theory that Hazel is in a way lupus, which I think is a quite imaginative thing to say. I'm surprised how far he pushes that. I'm not totally sure I agree with it, but I like being confronted with the possibility that as she became ill, her main character became the embodiment of her anxieties about her fitness for this world. And so Hazel Motes might have taken on some of that too. I think it was getting quite odd before she was getting sick, but still, there might be something to be said for that notion. I want to say, if you haven't looked at the quotation on page 200, do sometimes. Brad puts it in italics in the middle of the page. This is a passage of the novel that I used to not think that much about, but it's just grown in significance because people keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. This is the result of Caroline Gordon telling Flannery, one of the problems with you, darling, is that you don't ever take the camera's focus away from the specific characters, and they're too weird. You need to back off sometimes and show us that you have standards and that you know how to judge these crazy people you're describing for your characters. That's not exactly how Caroline Gordon would have said it, but it's a fair paraphrase. So Flannery wrote this and added it at chapter 3. Beginning of chapter 3. Apparently, Caroline Gordon was satisfied that she got the student to do what she wanted the student to do. I look at this and I say, oh, really? Is that what Flannery is doing? Coming up with a way of judging her characters and showing that they are all highly flawed? Well, maybe a little bit. Let's see. I get the second, it's only 2 sentences. The second sentence is, the black sky was underpinned with long silver streaks that looked like scaffolding, and depth on depth behind it were thousands of stars that all seemed to be moving very slowly as if they were about some vast construction work that involved the whole order of the universe and would take all time to complete. Okay, that's a standard of evaluation. Now we can say, well, now we know that Hazel Motes is cuckoo because the stars are moving around. I don't quite get it. Okay. And I will say to you that when Bob Donahue finishes his book about Flannery O'Connor, he's going to publish this wonderful chapter that he's never published elsewhere about, well, among other things, the building of highways in Middle Georgia. And the way he reads that passage is that it's about highways. It's about there being a dirt road out in front of Andalusia for way longer than it should have been because they were supposed to build a real highway. So you can just imagine how Bob takes the lines as if they were about some vast construction work that involved the whole order of the universe and would take all time to complete. He says, this is about the state of Georgia not paving the roads. It's going to take them forever to get the road bill out in front of Andalusia Farm. I love that. I just think, oh, that's a stroke of genius. And he's, Bob is a new historian. He's got all this patience to look at picky historical data, and every once in a while it really pays off. And I think this is going to be one of those. He's real good on Wise Blood. Okay, I had to say that. There's some talk here about the displaced person and how Flannery was using her life on the farm at Andalusia to construct that story. And yeah, she did. And I'll just mention in passing that we're going to publish a an interview with Al Matashak in the next Flannery O'Connor review. It's going to be right next to the interview material that Stephanie Opperman and her students have been collecting. Al Matashak says he doesn't understand why it's called the Hill House, because he lived there and the Stevens family lived in the Hill House. Why aren't their names on a plaque on the front of that building? Everybody in this story apparently lived in the Hill House at some point. And I was happy to have my first meeting with the great niece of Louise Hill yesterday over coffee. And she and her family are not happy with the way the Hill House has been preserved and presented to the world. And I think, the Hill House is getting to be really interesting, and nobody's happy with the way Georgia College or anybody else has ever handled the Hill House and how we've talked about it. There were a lot of people who live there, and there's a case to be made that the people who were actually doing the work on that farm all took turns living in the Hill House. That's where the workers all took their turn. And so the fact that the Hill House looks like a not very great place to live, may take on more significance and more significance and more significance. Okay. All right. Y'all are going to let me get away with that. I'll go on to the next idea, which is that, and now I think of this as a real Milledgeville thing. I said this at 2:00 today in Eatonton, and they said, "Oh, anybody in the South would do this. This is universal." And they said, "We do this in the Midwest." Okay, maybe. I had forgotten this, that Brad says that everybody in town knew about Wise Blood. They hated it. They were all talking to each other about Flannery O'Connor has written this ridiculous, horrible novel. It's an embarrassment to us all. And then they all got together and said, "So now we will throw an elaborate party in her honor. And she will know we are doing this because of who we are, not because of what we think of what she has done." I don't know, the psychology of that is ever so much more convoluted than I had ever taken in. That everybody knows that everybody in the room is down on this novel. And Flannery's sitting there just signing copy after copy after copy. And she knows nobody likes it. And it would have been wonderful to be in that room to see that go on. And let me say again, if you're ever at a yard sale and you see a copy of the first edition of Wise Blood, you just snatch that thing right up at whatever price, because it's just going up and up and up and up and up in value. I walked into the Georgia Writers Museum today, and they had a first edition of Wise Blood sitting out there on the display case where anybody could have walked off with it. And we talked about it for a couple of minutes, and they took it away and locked it up because they realized it was just asking to be stolen. There are not very many copies of that book because it didn't sell. She made almost no money on the royalties from that book. Okay, that was kind of a tacky comment I made, wasn't it? Okay, and then we got the rest of the hour to talk about Eric Lancure. Now, I've told this story so many times that some people are going to be real tired of hearing it again. What I know about this is that when I first got here, my predecessor, Sarah Gordon, had set up a session called Flannery's Friendships at one of her elaborate conferences that she used to put on. And the name Flannery's Friendships was enough to scare her family. Louise Florencourt went around and read the Riot Act to everybody she could meet. There was a person, I swear, got up on that stage in the auditorium and talked for 20 minutes, but never mentioned Flannery O'Connor because she was so intimidated based on meeting Louise Flannery, Flannery's cousin, who had immense power and was a smart lawyer. Mark Bosco got up and gave a paper about Flannery and Eric Lankier. This was pretty much news to everybody in the auditorium. Okay. And he was not intimidated by Louise Flannery for two reasons. One, he hid from her by staying in the Chick-fil-A in the student union for 3 hours before he went on stage. He didn't think that Louise would go into a Chick-fil-A. And also, the story I heard, and this was not, I did not witness this, but I repeated it many times, you know, I repeat the gossip, is that after she heard his talk, and she was justified in some of her outrage, she went up to him and said, "Young man, you can't say those things." And he said, "What are you going to do? Sue the Society of Jesus?" Father Bosco is a Jesuit. He worked at Loyola University of Chicago. The president of Loyola University of Chicago is Father Michael Garanzini, who is still half of the team who makes decisions about permissions. So Mark Bosco knew that he was the only person in America who could publish this material about Eric Lankier, because his boss was not going to agree that the estate could sue him. He could get away with anything. So he published some stuff about the Flannery-Eric relationship in the Southern Review, and then he published some more of it in the Flannery-O'Connor Review. I expected to be struck by lightning for those months when that thing was in the works, but you know, nothing ever came of it. He's the one who said, Mark Bosco was the one who said that when Eric Lankier, the boyfriend, the guy who came to town selling textbooks and was introduced to Flannery O'Connor and she fell in love with him, that when he was asked, what was it like to kiss Flannery O'Connor when you took her for a ride in your car? He said, it was like kissing a skull. Sometimes he says it was like kissing a skeleton. You imagine 400 people in the auditorium at Georgia College going at the same time. That was what it was like when he said that. It wasn't very polite, you know, to say that. And I say that having repeated this story ever since Mark said it. And, you know, what right do I have to disapprove of him saying when I repeat him all the time on this point? Apparently, Flannery was more in love with Eric than Eric was in love with Flannery. She turned him into Manly Pointer. And I have for years said, well, obviously, she wrote the story to get revenge on Eric for dumping her for the woman he's still married to over in Denmark, I guess. They are still. And I should have reread the passage about that before I said what I'm about to say. But I think Brad treats this in a much more complicated manner than I was able to take in. I still don't have it straight in my head. I think Brad is saying, in the way he talks about the composition of Good Country People, that Flannery turned Eric into Manly Pointer and wrote this gotcha story before they broke up. Wow. What's the psychology of that? Are you so unsure about your boyfriend that you're thinking about how you can get your revenge on him while you're still hopeful about how this is going to turn out? I have to think about that for a few more decades before I can reach a conclusion about what's going on here. This scene about the Flannery-Eric relationship and how it turned into Good Country People has now been mythologized into, you know, it's been mythologized. It's a great myth now. It's something that people use for all sorts of purposes when they talk about Flannery. And okay, here's another little puzzle. I mean, I'm going to get less and less certain as I talk about this Eric chapter. What was Flannery O'Connor writing in the years of? Okay, let me start that over. When Flannery was falling in love with Eric Lancure, some other events were going on in town which Flannery O'Connor turned into fiction. Marion Stembridge, a local insane PTSD crook, racist merchant, shot several people in downtown Milledgeville, and during a civic celebration. And it got a lot of publicity. When Flannery O'Connor was writing letters to people while that was going on, she talked to them about Eric. She did write a story about the shootings, but it took her years. And she puts herself in the story, and she tries to make the story a love story. It's called the Partridge Festival. It's like, she doesn't really want to talk about the killings. She wants to talk about a love relationship. And it's like she's still mixing up herself and Eric in that story that comes out years later. It's quite the puzzle why that tantalizing material had to be treated the way she treated it. By the way, if you've never read Pete Dexter's novel called Paris Trout, it turns these events into a novel for which he won the National Book Award in 1988. And it's a fascinating story. There was a lot more there than Flannery ever got around to using. And it was a mass murder, Why didn't she just think this was something she had to write about? But she got around to it later. And then, her mother was so offended by it and she thought everybody in Milledgeville is not going to like what you wrote. Oh, the horror, that Flannery decided to publish it someplace where nobody in town would ever see it, namely a Catholic magazine. And that apparently was, enough to satisfy Regina that, their secret would be safe, that nobody in town will ever notice it. She was still writing, this seems clear, that she was still writing love letters to Eric after she wrote that story. Yeah. When she started, was she writing the story as she was writing letters? I mean, that's where I get a little confused. But more research needs to be done, more biography. Okay, here's another detail I picked up recently, and I'm going to throw it in here, although it's really more about the last chapter rather than this chapter. In the interview that we're publishing with Al Matiszak, he's the little kid, he turned into the little kid of the Gujak family and the displaced person. He says, oh yeah, both my mother and my father were married to other people back in Poland before we became displaced people and came to America, and my family started. I had never heard that before. I sent the interviewers back to talk to Al. Tell us more about these other families. And I would have been happy to get more details, but Al only knew so much. He told us what he knew about that. But turns out Mr. Gujak and his wife both had backstories that didn't quite get into Flannery's story. Okay, that's probably enough. in Eatonton this afternoon, I said something about the interesting detail that Georgia in Flannery's time was #1 in lynchings in America. And we talked way too much about lynchings in Georgia. Famous for lynchings, you know, and somehow it has something to do with the circle in the fire in addition to the displaced person. And it may be that you just have to agree that, well, lynching is always in the background with everything that Flannery writes. You know, racial terrorism is always in the background, although she might push it away a little bit. She might play it for a joke. Jessica Hooten Wilson, who was here in town recently talking about writing, trying to write a novel based on the manuscripts of O'Connor's third novel, Why Did the Heathen Rage, which she never finished. Jessica pulled out a bunch of pages of drafts for The Violent Buried Away, stuff that never got into The Violent Buried Away, and said, this would be a good ending to Why Did the Heathen Rage? It's not categorized as drafts of Why Did the Heathen Rage, but Jessica just thought, if I'm going to make this into a novel, maybe that's the way to go. It's about the KKK. Flannery did write quite a few pages about the KKK, and they're all the different ways to make significance out of that, and used almost none of it. And you know, that means it's significant, but it means that what she couldn't persuade herself that she really had the handle on it that she wanted to have. You know, I love both the novels. I think she, you know, sometimes the stories are better because she could solve a problem. And this is to go back to Stephanie's question from before. I think sometimes she would take a problem and she'd drive herself nuts with it in the novel. And then she could solve it as long as she handled it within the confines of a short story. Trying to work it all out in the form of a novel, that got to be too hard, I guess. But I don't think that the last 3 stories that she wrote, Revelation and Judgment Day and Parker's Back, would be as good as they are if it weren't for the fact that she was struggling along with Why Did the Heathen Rage, and suffering writer's block in the months before she gave up on that novel and decided to just write 3 great stories in the last year of her life as she was dying. Stephanie, you have your hand up again.
Hello. I wanted to ask, one of the things that really stood out to me about the sections that we read for tonight had to do with the relationships that Flannery had with like supportive couples, right? So like the Fitzgeralds and then also the Cheneys. And I was just kind of wondering, you know, I feel like the kind of basic version or like first layer version you get about Flannery's biography is that she was mostly at home with her mom. And then like you flesh that out, like it's fleshed out a little bit more as you get to know her and how she kind of sets this routine or sets this schedule to make it more like a writer's retreat for herself at home. So she has like the experience at Yaddo. She's able to some extent to recreate that at home. And then she also has these like 2 places where she can go and also have that similar kind of environment. So I guess my question is, I'm wondering if that was, if you know, if that was pretty common for single women writers in this era, that they were able to kind of carve out these different spaces and places for them to be and feel like they had their own sense of space and where they could write with their friends, or if that is something that's exceptional to Flannery.
Yeah. I don't know. I think in American literature, the deck has always been stacked against any woman writer to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
And travel by yourself to visit a couple who's in another state? No, that's not common.
Mhm.
I mean, we can think of Carson McCullers escaping to New York City and never going back. And we can, I've been reading a little bit of Eudora Welty and thinking, she had a really successful career. But none of them were fulfilling expectations about what a Southern woman was supposed to be. And it was always hard. And, for both Carson and Flannery, being sick came in handy. You're not expected to do certain things if you don't have the health to do it.
Mhm.
And so, oh, well, okay, so you can't be a housewife, then, oh, you'll find some other way to live your life, like being a famous writer. But if Regina certainly would have expected that Flannery O'Connor could have been Ruby Hill, if she could have been the person who's devoted to running a household, that's what she should have done.
Mhm.
And I thought where you were going to take the comment was that maybe Flannery wanted to visit other households so she could meet couples who liked each other. Because I'm beginning to suspect that the marriage between her parents was not great.
Yeah.
And that she needed to believe that the Fitzgeralds were okay. She needed to believe in the relationship between the Cheneys. Why did Flannery O'Connor say, marriage always comes as a shock to me? It always shocks me that there's such a thing as marriage. Well, what does that say about the marriages you've seen in your life, especially the one you see up close and personal? That you don't see evidence to take it seriously or think that this is a great idea? Yeah. Let me just admit for the fourth time in this hour that I'm running down the field of speculation here. I don't know about that. I don't know about that marriage. I put together little shreds of suspicion to say, maybe it wasn't great, between those two. And she wanted to get out as often as possible for whatever reason. Yeah. Katie?
Well, Brenda has a question here, and I had that too, talking about the love letters between Eric and Flannery. Did they survive? And if so, where are they housed?
Well, I think they're all the ones I know of, all the ones that Mark Bosco published are at Georgia College. And there might be more at Emory, but I can't think right offhand of what they would have been. It was just one of those categories of things where everybody knew you couldn't publish these. And because it's personal. And the estate would never say yes. And so they just sat there and people didn't even talk about them. And then along comes Mark and he says, ain't nobody gonna stop me. And so he did it. And people have been writing about Eric and Flannery. There was a time, poor Bill Sessions, when he was caught up in trying to write the authorized biography of Flannery O'Connor. I remember running into him at something and he told me that he spent last summer writing another 100 pages about Eric. Well, Brad didn't write 100 pages about Eric. What did Bill find that we still don't know about because his manuscript is sitting around somewhere not being published ever? So there's more to that. There's more to that story, and it's going to be fascinating. And we'll just, we'll all be dead when we find out what went on. Paul Opperman.
Yes, I'd like to share something that I really liked in these chapters. It was when she's staying with Sally Fitzgerald and her husband, but I think her husband takes off to Italy. And Sally reveals to her in the car that she has lupus. I thought that Brad did a really nice job of bringing us into the drama of that, and he went on to tell how he thought that was a major, I guess, revelation to her. Not that she had lupus, she may have suspected that, but a revelation about what the rest of her life would have to be. And I was struck by how then when she got home, she bought the peacocks. And so not only, well, he talks about how there was a very creative period after that, and her best work may be done then, but also this story of the peacocks gives an indication, okay, I've got to design my life in a new way. I've got to make this place home. And I just really like that. And maybe you can comment about that event.
I think that's one of Brad's best passages, that part. And, you know, what I wrote to myself as I was going through these pages was almost the opposite of what you made of it in passing. That I wrote down, Flannery said, I thought I had lupus. And he plays it. I mean, Sally Fitzgerald would play it, that Flannery had no idea, I had to tell her. And I've always thought she knew she had lupus. It's just complicated mother-daughter stuff. You're trying to protect me from knowing what I have, and I've got to protect you from knowing that I know what I have that killed my father. So they're both, you know, lying about it, supposedly for each other, and everybody's going nuts. And Sally Fitzgerald just kind of cuts the Gordian knot, and they can all say, oh, okay, it's lupus. But when Flannery says, I thought that's what it was, I think, okay, that's a sign that she had figured this out. She's got symptoms like her father's symptoms. How could she not figure this out? And still, I agree that, I mean, I would say Brad's probably right. That still, when you know for sure that what you suspect is the truth, then she did see, you know, this is my life now. It's going to be maybe very short. You know, her father lived for 3 years after he was diagnosed. And, you know, what'd she do? She wrote A Good Man Is Hard to Find in Other Stories in the 3 years after she was, you know, after she was sure it was the disease that killed her father. You know, best way to finish something is to have a deadline. And in a way, lupus gave Flannery a deadline, you know. And then poor thing, you know, as soon as she was starting to think about these stories, she was also starting to draft The Violent Bear It Away. She spent years writing that one too. And struggling and rethinking and thinking it's not right, it's not right. And then she would relax every once in a while and go write, you know, Greenleaf or something, and The Comforts of Home, and as a little break from her important work. Well, you know, whatever you use to trick yourself into getting your work done, hooray. You know, because if we all got everything perfect, we would never finish anything. And, you know, that was how Flannery, you know, figured out that she could make it work for her. You know, all these details that are coming out in this section about the composition of Good Country People only make me think, God, what was going on with that little story is so complicated. I'll never figure out what's going on here. But I can easily generalize and agree with Brad that she had a fireland under her, lupus, and her disease made her get busy and want to finish things, and it was different from the way she felt about writing a novel. And there's a lot of stuff. Isn't it funny that when I first, I mean, is this my stupidity? Probably. When I first read Brad's biography, I was young and stupid. Okay, I said, well, there's not that much new here. I've heard most of this stuff. And now, older and wiser, I read it and say, golly gee, there's so much stuff in here that I haven't thought about. What's that mean? I'm not sure. And it's still the case that, the way I have looked at this book for the last 20 years is mostly that I would just check quotes that other people are using. They quote the same stuff over and over and over and over and over. And they ignore all these other details that are in this book that raise all sorts of interesting questions and ought to be, sending people out into the world to do more research to try to figure out what the rest of the story is. I promise you, when Carol Schloss comes to town and talks about her book, it's going to demonstrate that, oh yeah, I mean, it's not that Brad's wrong. There's just a whole lot more to the story. There's a whole lot more to the story about the relationship between Regina and Flannery. And Carol is not able to get her hands on every shred of evidence that would be nice to have one's hands on. I mean, she ran into a wall here and there with her research, but it's, as you're reading Brad's book, you feel like you're getting the whole story, partly because he's a good writer. And then through no fault of his, he did this totally without the estate's cooperation. Through no fault of his own, there was stuff he couldn't know. He didn't have the Emory collection available. He didn't have any permission to do anything with previously unpublished manuscripts from the O'Connor estate. And more stuff comes out all the time. People are always finding, oh, look, here's a stack of Flannery O'Connor material that's never been published and nobody knows about it and so on. So wait 500 years and we'll have everything properly edited. Right now we're all pioneers and it's the Wild West, and God knows what we're going to find when we go through the Klein house and turn every page of that archive. You've never seen a bigger mess than the Klein house. Let me tell you, how many times have you been through it, Katie? I've walked through it briefly twice, and I just go, so you've been through it twice, that's all? I thought you were over there every day.
They won't let me.
Piles of stuff. We don't know what it is. Sitting around.
And a bunch of stuff got sold at a Catholic yard sale as well.
Yeah, the Catholic church in town had a yard sale, and lots of people went over there and bought family stuff. And so now it's just scattered all over the place.
Yeah, so if you're in Milledgeville and you go to a yard sale, look for that first edition of Wise Blood.
Yeah. So what Georgia College has is all the stuff that nobody considered important. But we got a lot of it sitting in that house, and I'm probably going to find some gems.
A lot. Yeah, and it's important, Well, Heidi had a question. Do you want to ask it, or do you want me to ask it for you?
Question. Go ahead. Oh, I see this button I'm supposed to push that says 6 new messages. I'm sorry. Heidi, go right ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just commenting as we were going along, so nothing that urgent. I was just trying to think of other single women, and Harper Lee came to mind, and her relationship with Truman Capote, which of course has a neat connection with Yaddo and Flannery and all of that too. And then just again connecting not just Flannery's inner circle with her mom, but the wider circle with all of her aunts and uncles, and just how many were single. I think beyond the Florencourts, it was pretty hard to find kind of a normal nuclear family in the whole Klein clan, if you will. So
yes, I think that there's plenty of room for somebody to broaden the focus and say, what is it with this family? What are the relationships like? And Brad gives you a lot of details about names of people who are living where and how they related to whom, and it all just goes out my left ear as soon as I read it. I know it's there, and I want somebody to figure this out for me so I don't have to. But I know enough to think that there's a lot to figure out. I'm just not the person to try to do it. And Sure, Harper Lee is another example. She got around, she had opportunities, at least to write one novel and then be tortured the rest of her life about how difficult it was for a person with her life to write a second book. You know, she started a third one too, but you know, there was a lot of frustration for her. Even, you know, look at the expectations that Truman Capote, her best friend in the world, had for Harper that were trouble for her. Think of all the ways in which he didn't help her, in which he questioned her, you know, ability to do what she wanted to do. That's America for you. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Anything else?
Can I ask one quick one? Because you
Sure.
said the whole biography was not done. It was not authorized, obviously. It didn't have the cooperation or blessing of the family. Because obviously if he's talking about things like Eric, it's not what they wanted. But do you know anything about how they viewed this? Because it won, you know, well, I don't know if it won any awards, but it was such a big bestseller. It was so splashy. Do you know anything about the family's attitude toward this after?
I think they're glad now that it exists. They still wanted to have an authorized biography. They thought that Bill Sessions would be able to write something that would be immensely more correct and thorough
Okay.
than what Brad did. Well, there's too much. You know, Sally Fitzgerald couldn't finish, and Bill couldn't finish. And there was just more than anybody could get a handle on. Brad, you know, had Little Brown saying, you have to finish this book by such and such a date. And I think he went into panic mode at a certain point, and he was glad when it was over. And then, have I ever told you this story? When he came and gave a lecture at the 2014 NEH Summer Institute, Louise came and sat on the front row, and they looked at each other, and he gave his speech without any notes about how wonderful it was that he wrote his book without any permission from the estate. Talked about how it was a much better book because it wasn't authorized in this way, and this way, and this way, and this way, and this way. And she smiled and was pleasant for the evening, and there, you know, there were no lightning, no thunder. It's just everybody said that about it. I thought, well, this is really quite a remarkable exchange that we're having. Louise isn't saying anything, but I just thought, well, they're both having thoughts about each other as this is going on. You know, I certainly can't blame Louise for being loyal to the person she had picked as the authorized biographer. I mean, looking back on it now, I think Bill Sessions, who wrote the kind of book he did about, was it Wyatt or Surrey, the Renaissance poet that he wrote the big biography of. He could write a biography, but he could also get overwhelmed by data and feel like you have to put it all in. Brad proved that he could be selective, and he could highlight the important points, and it's not 1,000 pages. We don't have to have this discussion about, could we turn this into a 2-volume biography like the Faulkner biography? You know, it's better for being shorter. And, you know, and Flannery said there weren't going to be any biographies because who wants to hear about a life that's lived in the house in the chicken yard? And still, there's a lot worth contemplating, because, you know, her life and her art are, you know, are pretty connected. So I don't know. I guess that's all I know to say on that score. I wish Brad could figure out an excuse to write more about Flannery O'Connor. I think it would be, I think he'd do a good job of writing about any other little new thing, new issue about Flannery O'Connor's life. And I say that, and I'm telling you, Carol Schloss has written a great book. It's forthcoming. It's already been accepted by University of Georgia Press, and I think it's supposed to come out in 2026. Get yourself a copy when it comes out, and you'll say, oh, well, she's not contradicting anything that Brad says. I don't think she contradicts anything Gene Cash says in the first biography of O'Connor. It's just there are all these additional questions about the relationship between Regina and Flannery. And there are a lot of surprises in there. I slapped myself a number of times for why did I never ask this question? Why did I never wonder about this? Well, I've only been working on it for 30 years. What do you expect? I'll have to work that into my introduction to Carol Schloss. I get to introduce Carol Schloss when she comes to town. I'll have to say that. I have slapped myself 30 times for not having raised the questions that Carol Schloss is raising when she writes this biography. Well, Brad and the other biographies make you feel like, okay, there are all these biographical treatments of Flannery O'Connor. We surely have kind of gotten all the data out there, and we're getting close to being done. No, we're not. There's a lot more out there. Okay, folks, I think we should declare victory and move on. Thank you very much for sticking around, and we will see you in March and finish Flannery's life before she has her 100th birthday. Won't that be weird? Okay. All right. Thank you all. All right.
Thanks,
See ya.
everybody.
Click.